2. And we're live. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Insurrection with Brenton Lengel, carried formerly on the Starcom Radio Network, now carried on YouTube. And I am here joined by Dr. Ben Burgis, one of my absolute favorite people on the left. He's a phenomenal interlocutor and author of Give Them an Argument and Canceling Comedians While the World Burns. And you also have a new book on Christopher Hitchens that's just about to come out, correct?
Yep. Comes out officially on New Year's Eve. So, too late to, actually wrap it up and put it under the tree for your whiskey swilling atheist uncle. But but you can pre-order it now, print out the receipt, and fold it up and use it as a stocking stuffer.
Absolutely. I'm really excited. I want to get a copy of that book as well. So I'll be buying it as soon as it's available.
I should say it's, you can pre-order it on Amazon and all the usual places, but if you would like to order it from a worker-owned bookstore that you can order from online, and they'll send it to you for at least within the U.S. wherever. I if I was aware of these places in other countries, I'd plug this, but the Red Emma's in Baltimore, so that's redemmas.org. You can pre-order it from there, and you can buy those other books too if you feel like it.
Redemmas.org. I will be getting that. That's reference to Emma Goldman, I would assume.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. It's a worker co-op bookstore in Baltimore.
That's so cool. Okay, I've never been there. Next time I'm in Baltimore, I'll be sure to drop by. So, you and I got to know each other through debates. You were gracious enough to come on Modern Day Debate, and since then, I think we've done a couple of streams together. We partnered in a debate, and you've been also gracious enough to have me on your awesome podcast, Give Them an Argument, with Ben Burgis. So this has been, I've seen a lot of Ben Burgis debate content. We'll just say that. I think that before I give you my feeling on this, do you want to introduce this particular debate to the audience? I mean, it's in the thing, but I mean, this is a momentous occasion. So
yeah. So the debate was with Charlie Kirk, who, if you don't know who that is, you can check out footage of last year's Republican National Convention. He did have a speaking slot there, or you can watch one of his love fests with Tucker Carlson on Fox News. Actually, you can see him interview Donald Trump, and that interview starts with "Welcome to Arizona." So the backdrop looks very different. So I don't think it's the same room, but I think Trump probably was in that same building in Phoenix.
Oh, wow.
At some point in the past, like whatever that, I think it was like July of last year that interview was. This is definitely has a little bit of the feeling of like, the hobbits going into Mordor, to walk into this building.
Okay, right now, somebody in the audience, please create some fan art of Ben Burgis as a hobbit walking to Mordor with Charlie Kirk as
the eye and the
eye
the
of
face
the
maybe, and no, exactly. So the way this came about is there's an organization called Town Circle with an S, and they're a debate hosting website, and the way it works, like the structure is like GoFundMe. The pledges are only collected if the thing happens, but people can pledge money to charity to try to encourage people to accept debate invitations. So we raised about enough. I don't, now I won't claim to know, what the quality of these meals are, whatever, but it says, I hope, I hope they don't just mean ramen noodles or something, but they say that we raised enough for, about 11,000 meals to go to needy people. And then I really didn't think it was going to happen, but then at the last minute they accepted. And so my wife and I went out to Phoenix a couple of weeks ago, which is when the debate actually happened. And it's, don't think I'd ever been to Phoenix before. You know, it was very, you know, lots of good Southwest atmosphere. I think like we got to our hotel the first night, you know, there's like, you know, it's dark. There's like giant cactus there. And like, as we're driving up, there are like 3 coyotes that, you know, walk past in front of us all at once.
Why?
Yeah.
Well,
but yeah,
I've heard good things about the University of Phoenix.
yeah, TV. I think I've heard that too. Yeah, exactly. So I will say, actually, this is a huge digression, but we did do a couple of cool things in Phoenix over the weekend while we were there. So we went to a place called the Fry Bread House, which is really good. Like, you know, it's like a sort of Native American, Mexican fusion kind of thing. Since I guess this is like the fry bread thing is something that people started doing on reservations because like they had so few ingredients, but like it's really good. And we went to see this thing called the Flying V Cabin, which is this cabin that's like this 19th century preserved cabin, and there are no windows, but they're like gun slits to like shoot out of it. And the best thing is really about the plaque, which goes into the history of this crazy feud between these 2 rancher families that this cabin was built as part of. And like apparently this was a huge deal. Like it was a big enough deal that it delayed Arizona's admission to the Union. And
because these 2 families are just killing each other.
Yeah, exactly. And it was like such embarrassing national news or whatever. Like they had like it went on for like 15 years or something like that. And like hitmen were hired, people were kidnapped. It finally ended when the last surviving male in one of the families shot the last surviving male in the other family. And then when he was in court, like at his trial, the widow of the guy he shot tried to shoot him, but then her gun misfired.
Oh, that's kind of awesome.
No, I mean, I think somebody really needs to make a movie of this. But yeah, that, and then the Turning Points USA building is crazy. Like I was just saying this on Left Reckoning earlier, that like, especially the contrast is hilarious to me, because like just a couple weeks before that, I'd been in New York, and while I was there, I went to the building where the Jacobin offices are, and you know, I've been writing for them for a while, but a lot of that was under lockdown and whatever. Like this is the first time I was actually in the building, and it's like 1 floor of a nondescript, you know, building that's, you know, mostly devoted to other stuff. And I think they had to like use like a broom to like prop up the door leading out to the, you know, the hallway. And like while I was there, you know, Bhaskar, the editor, was nice enough to like get together a party on the roof of the building. But like the total financial outlay for that was like ordering a pizza.
Yeah.
And Turning Points USA is its own building. It says Turning Points USA in giant letters on the outside. You go through sliding glass doors, and there's like, you know, there are like Turning Points USA floor mats, and you know the restrooms say Turning Points USA on them, and they've got a green room. They actually asked if I wanted like in the lead up, you know, like one of the employees Turning Points USA asked if I had a rider or any food or drink requests. And for a moment, I had like a second where I was like, I should really do some crazy rock star shit here. You know, but like a chump, I said, no, I'm good.
Bowl of one. You know what? I will remember that if I ever find myself in that building. I will have something insane on my rider. I'll do it for you, Ben. So that's I'm not at all surprised. You know, as Jacobin is like, you know, there's not a lot of money on the left, period, because what we have to say is actually dangerous to the status quo, and rich people really don't like it. And on the right, there is an insane amount of money for people to, because if TPUSA, that started out and I guess it still is, maybe it's growing into something bigger, but like it was a propaganda outlet to try to convince millennials and Zoomers to not do the thing that all of us are doing, which is become socialist and move to the left. You know, it's sort of a bulwark against indoctrination, socialist indoctrination. In
well, I will say, one funny detail that I did not share on Left Reckoning or we talked about in my show is that I at the debate, if you look at the clips, you'd see I was wearing a T-shirt with the image from the Biden inauguration with Bernie with the mask and mittens and all that stuff, and said "Feel the bird" on it. And then he actually told me, like when he came up to the green room, that his staff had told him I was wearing that shirt, so he put on his "Socialism Sucks" shirt, which was it's like the parody of the Bernie logo. It says "Socialism Sucks."
I'm glad that you two had like a battle of T-shirts, but I just want to point out, and I think I said this to you earlier, your shirt was a reference to a thing that happened with a big like meme that was shared around the country, and it was a pun,
right?
Like, and then his was just a statement.
Sucks.
So okay, that's your opinion, dude, but like, I think right there though, that goes to show kind of the difference in caliber between the debaters, because now I have seen you debate very often, Ben, and I've really got to say I think this was your strongest debate that I've ever seen out of you, like directly. I thought you did incredibly well.
Well, thank you. I feel good about it. I had and I don't. Look, I'll say. I was actually thinking about this the other day. I can remember the first, I guess it was like the third overall, because there were like two that were with like right-wing like streamers with like small channels that I go on to argue with the host. But like the first real debate, that I ever did was in 2019. It was with Dave Smith, who's a libertarian pundit and comedian. And I was on his show, Part of the Problem. And happily for me, that debate has long since disappeared behind a paywall. Because like looking back on it, it's like, well, I didn't quite get what this was. I was like treating it as if like this live debate, as if it were like a graduate seminar where you have all the time in the world to kind of like
make your point and
slowly and directly bring out some principle by playing with different examples. And to any normal person who doesn't have the right sort of academic background to like develop a high tolerance for that stuff, like that just looks like that just looks like stonewalling. That just looks evasive. And so I think that was like really bad. And then within that obviously I've done a bunch of these since then, but I felt better about this than anything before it.
Yeah, no, I thought it was really, really good. Because what a lot of people don't realize about debate, and I consider debate performance art. Like it's performance art with substance, and it can be bigger than that. But in a lot of ways, you are performing. And oftentimes it's not the arguments that people find really persuasive, it's the emotions and the story. And not to toot my own horn too much or to derail us. Recently I did a debate against noted Eggman, Stefan
Molyneux. Yeah.
And when I did I obliterated him in my opening statement, if I do say so myself. But and throughout the rest of the debate, controlled it pretty well. But I couldn't help but notice that the two strongest debaters on that field, out of everybody, and was myself and Molyneux, and both of us were theater majors. So just saying, when you are watching debate, don't let yourself get taken in by it necessarily, but keep your mind critical, essentially.
Yeah. So I think, to my mind, one question about this is what's the goal, right? Like what do you try to do? Because presumably, unless it's just it's a Thursday night, I don't have anything better to do. I'm going to do a debate, which, in certain contexts, I mean, especially if you're doing it on YouTube. So, you don't you don't
perhaps
have to go anywhere.
perhaps at modern day debate. Just
yeah, exactly. So in that kind of context, that certainly nothing wrong with that, right? That's just it's Thursday, why not, right? But if it is more significant to you to that, right? That it's worth thinking about who it is that you're trying to reach and how you could reach them. And I think that there are at least two different, ways of doing that. One is that you're just kind of, you're just kind of having fun, and maybe the goal, as much as anything, is just that you're kind of providing content to the audience you've already got, and you're you're sort of giving them things to cheer for, right? And I think that's how a lot of people approach debates, and honestly, I think it has its place, but I think that's a very different thing from what you're trying to do is take anybody who might be in their audience and plant whatever seed you can to try to dislodge them a little bit, from this worldview. And I think a lot of people will say these things like, oh, debates don't change anybody's minds, whatever, which, I think what they're doing is they're going from the true premise that Charlie Kirk or whoever's most hardcore fans won't be swayed, which of course, right? That's not the case. To the false conclusion that nobody's going to get swayed, which we know isn't true, because anybody who does this all the time, will have people tell them, that they're brought around by these, or that this played some role in influencing them on whatever journey they're having. You want to try to reach whoever it happens to be at the right place in their lives at that moment, where they're open to a different perspective. And so I think that actually the debate that Charlie Kirk did just before me was with this comedian Ben Glebe. They were arguing about abortion, and there was this super viral moment where Glebe shows him a picture of a fetus and says, "Do you really think this is a human life?" And Charlie, with great authority, says, "Yes, absolutely." He says, "What I actually just showed you was a dolphin fetus." And that's really good for making us laugh, right? That's if that's the goal, mission accomplished. But I don't. What I hope that I did here is that I hope that anybody, the main goal from my perspective was Charlie Kirk, like Donald Trump, like Tucker Carlson, Josh Hawley, JD Vance, even Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio, all these guys, has branded himself lately as a
populist.
And I wanted to try to show anybody who takes that branding seriously that no, he's fucking not.
Not at all. No. Now, it's very interesting with Charlie too, because this is the second debate of his that I saw. And, I never really took him very seriously, as an intellectual, because, he's the guy whose face keeps shrinking in the memes. He's the guy who, his job was to try and keep people from learning things in college. So and it seems like at this point he's trying to rebrand himself, and he definitely has some, he's definitely got some charisma. I did not expect that going into, going into watching the debate. I noticed a little bit of it with Vosh, and I noticed it between you and him. He was also polite, looking at him when I went up against Molyneux. I asked him in the opening statement, can I offer you an egg in this trying time? And I had the eggs there because, I watched the Stephan debate with Douglas Lane and watched Stephan accuse Douglas of wanting to kill him. And I'm just okay, this guy's an idiot and I can't have a good faith conversation with him. So I'm just going to trigger him right off the bat. Yeah. But I felt Charlie, even at the beginning, was kind of I kind of wanted more of a discussion than a debate. And it didn't look like he was really going to try to get to the point where he puts out the big viral clip of Charlie Kirk owns Ben Burgis. It seems like he kind of wants to be taken seriously as a debater and an interlocutor and an intellectual here. And I think so he did surprise me in that. What was your feed on that part of the debate?
Yeah, no, I think that's true. I think that for the most part, the previous debates that I've seen by him, that's largely true. The one where it's the least true, and maybe significantly was the earliest chronologically, I think, of all these, was his debate a few years ago with Hassan Piker. Now, maybe some of that was just about the way their personalities were kind of, bouncing off each other, that like everybody got mad. But maybe some of it is just that he was maybe less interested in that at that stage, right? Maybe he did want to do a little bit more of that viral content there. But like when he was debating Sam Cedar and Vosh and Kyle Kalinske too, I think in all of those cases, he was doing more what you're describing. By the way, for my money, we watched the Vosh one together. I think that was good. And I think Vosh probably accomplished what he set out to do. I
would agree. I think we both said that.
Yeah, I think the Sam Cedar one was good also. But for my money, and like this is clearly not me being like sectarian about this, because look, actually know Sam Cedar a little bit, and Vosh less, whatever. But this is out of that list of people, this is the one that I've had the very least interactions with, and he's disagreed with me about important things. But I think by far the best previous one was the Kyle Kalinske one in 2019, which I kind of did a callback to in this, because there was this moment that just astonished me in 2019 when
I was waiting for you to bring this up.
Yeah, when Kyle Kalinske asked him if he would be willing to raise Jeff Bezos's taxes by like 1%, if that meant that that would be enough to provide housing for every single homeless veteran in the United States. And his answer at that time was, well, I hope he would do it voluntarily.
Oh, Charlie. Charlie. So maybe it does signify growth, because you asked him that same question, and his response was that he would, except he doesn't want it. And what's interesting is this is the libertarian argument sometimes that you hear on taxes, is we don't want the taxes going to the bad stuff that the government does, which you, of course, had the perfect comeback to, because he mentioned like domestic spying. And you're like, yes, let's not do that either.
Yeah. I mean, we should. Yeah, I mean, clearly we shouldn't have a domestic spy agency, which is, I think, one of like 4 things that we agreed on, and one of the only ones that's actually important. Because the other things that we agreed on were like Hunter Biden is a dirtbag, and like stuff like that.
And Jeff Bezos is a monster.
Yeah, right. Like we agreed on all that. Although I would also point out that the actual point I was making when I brought up Jeff Bezos in my opening statement was not look at this particular guy who's a bad guy. I mean, he certainly is, but that wasn't my point. My point was this is an economic system that produces Jeff Bezos's that allows for this to happen in the first place, and we certainly didn't agree on that. But yeah, at the end, so there were 2 parts of it. There was the first hour was the one that was later released as an episode of this new show, Debate Night with Charlie Kirk, and then there was another, like a kind of bonus hour, like a post game, and when we were like going back and forth about this, in advance of the debate happening, like they agreed they'd send us both and we could just play both, but at the end of the main hour, like I managed to slip that in, like, okay, so this is what you told Kyle Kalinske in 2019. It's pretty safe to say 2 years later that Bezos is not going to do it voluntarily.
He would rather be going into space.
Yeah, he'd rather buy a spaceship. So now would you be willing to do that? And he kind of hemmed and hawed, and and he said, well, he probably would, but then he kind of talked himself into how he wouldn't, because then it would be going towards all the bad stuff. And I said, well, okay, but like, what if it's specifically earmarked, for the homeless veterans? Then would you be willing to do it? And I think he kind of worked his way back to yes. And
yeah,
and
that
was
a beautiful moment.
I was trying to look, I'm always almost always. I think I've lost it like a couple times, in different debates, but like, I am almost always extremely chill and polite in debates, which, is on purpose, because if, I don't want anybody to have an excuse to be like, oh, I'm not listening to that. That's just another triggered, lefty. Like I want to be like extremely chill and extremely polite. So there's no excuse to focus on anything except for the actual words that are coming out of my mouth and what I'm saying. And I think, but I think this was one of the moments of the debate where I did give in a little bit to the temptation to be just a little bit obnoxious, because when he said that, I was like, oh my God, Charlie, I'm so happy to hear this. This is progress.
Yeah,
this is good.
Well, but it is progress, and I think even he would have to admit, assuming that's a genuinely held position, which it seemed to be, like, because he did seem to be somewhat good faith throughout the debate, and maybe it's an act, I don't know, but one of the other things that I noticed, and this is something that I'm glad you didn't bite on this, especially if you're talking to his audience. And I even noticed at the point where he was like, you're hiding your radicalism. Yes. And you're like, I'm front loading my radicalism.
Yeah, because literally what I said in my opening statement was, I kind of did the basically 10 seconds of making a really condensed version of the point about equality of opportunity that J.A. Cohen spends his book Why Not Socialism making, it's really that the objectionable thing about inequality is that we don't get to it's outside of our control, right? You don't get to decide whether you're born into a rich family or a poor family. You don't get to decide whether you're going to have the particular set of skills that might help you climb some sort of educational career ladder. So there was 10 seconds of that. There was a minute of capitalism is bad, right? Talking about Bezos and all that. And then before I said a word about healthcare or the minimum wage or any of that, I said, look, we could argue about what I would consider to be utopian. We could contrast my vision with yours, and I'm up for that. But what I really want to start with is, what about these baby steps in the right direction that we could be taking right now, like healthcare, like, a higher minimum wage, making it easier to organize a union. If you're such a populist, why don't you support any of that? And then even a few minutes later, when he brings up the, you can kind of see, he's doing this thing where he's like, "Ooh, look at this trap," right? That I'm going to ask him, what are the countries where, democratic socialism, whatever has happened, and then he's going to say Norway and Sweden, and then I'm going to get him, because here are all the things about Norway and Sweden that he's not going to like.
That's not socialist, and
yeah. And so the first thing I said though was, look, none of these are anything like what I would consider to be fully socialist societies. I've been totally happy to talk about what that would mean to me, but and then we had the rest of the discussion, so it was very weird that later when he said, it seemed, you're cloaking your radicalism, by talking about, healthcare and the minimum wage, and all this stuff. And then actually when I said that, he went to, because I think I also said, seems to be that I talk, I write about, pretty radical, long-term proposals all the time. And he was like, oh yeah, banning private beaches and letting the entire nation of Afghanistan, come to the
which you made a good point that most Afghans probably, or at least a large amount of them, probably support the Taliban. And you were talking about letting in the people that we had explicitly fucked over.
Yeah, exactly. I think I don't think the entire nation of Afghanistan wants to become Americans. I think that quite a bit of the nation of Afghanistan supports the Taliban. That was kind of the problem in the first place. But yeah, refugees fleeing from a situation that we created. Yeah, I mean, like if you're gonna set fire to somebody else's house, the least you can do is let them stay in your spare bedroom for a while.
Yeah, exactly. And so this was one of the things that in the debate he kept coming back to. And I have discovered, I have a suspicion about this because he kept talking about the family. And I'm really glad you didn't go down that route with him because, I thought it was more important that you get your message out to his audience. But so the big issue, though, like with regard to when he was talking about the family, I have a suspicion that the family is the Republican version of identity politics for Democrats. It's the thing that they want to focus on so they don't actually do anything about the power relations that they are defending. Because, it's like when you focus on individualism and the family and self-help, that conveniently gets the focus away from, hey, let's take Jeff Bezos's money and property.
Exactly. Like literally my opening statement is all about I, as a populist, right? Somebody who used corporate as an insult, which it's hilarious that all these guys do that now, right? That they, I've seen, like it's so weird because it feels like it just happened like over the course of like the last 6 months or something that they've all like adopted this rhetorical stance. Like I've seen Ted Cruz talk about, like in the last few months, use the phrase the corporate media, like he was a guest on Democracy Now! In 2005. It's just bizarre. But like you want to say you're not corporate, you're a populist, why don't you support all these specific policies that would materially benefit working class people? And of course, I mean, what are you going to say, right? Like you don't want to go into doing what he ended up doing anyway, which was basically spend an hour giving me Wall Street Journal editorial arguments against raising the minimum wage and giving people health care and all this stuff. You want to do something that sounds like you're this different kind of conservative. So what he basically spent 2 minutes talking about how amazing families are and how beautiful the family is as an institution. It's like, okay, dude, yeah, families are great. We probably disagree about what constitutes a family, but like I would have a broader definition. I expect that you do, but sure, like if people want to get married, start families, and all that stuff, I absolutely think they should be able to do those things. But what are you going to do that's actually going to help them do that? I mean, just intoning the word family over and over again, how about we institute a policy so new moms actually get paid paid leave, after they have kids, how about
brilliant. How about we take care of healthcare so people can have babies without breaking the bank or going into debt. And
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And by the way, also, he directly contradicted himself during the debate because like within the span of a couple of sentences, because when you were talking about is there really equality of opportunity, and you were saying could this guy could everybody take out a loan? Could everyone take that risk? First he said no. And then one sentence later, he said yes. And then of course you brought it back around and explained it to him that no, obviously no, this can't happen because we have a system which no matter how much entrepreneurship people involve themselves in, no matter how functional their families, we still have a system that is based on a tiny minority fleecing the larger majority for their labor. And so
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that was actually a really funny exchange because you're right. He did kind of want to have it both ways. I think maybe the charitable interpretation is not what he meant when he admitted that not everybody could, is not everybody would be good at that. That all, because some of the things he was saying, like not everybody can dunk a basketball, etc. Which, by the way, I didn't say any of this in the debate because I want to focus on the main point. But like, yeah, not everybody is going to be equally good at dunking a basketball, and that is actually a perfectly good objection to a setup where basketball players are, paid like a zillion times, as much as
where they get to become king. Not everybody's as good at dunking a basketball, so let's not let freaking, the Michael Jordan of business become my freaking overlord and buy a rocket into space.
Like if we had a system where, we were ruled by an aristocracy, but you could like make it into the aristocracy by winning a bunch of basketball tournaments, that'd be a bad system. It'd be really unfair because as anybody who's ever seen me play basketball knows, some people really suck at that. So no question, right? So
hang on, I don't want to derail you here too much, but there was one other thing. So the thing about the family, I didn't want to get past this because it didn't get brought up, and I'm glad it didn't. But these people, whenever they defend the nuclear family, it's like they think like that's the only family. That's the family. It's called the nuclear family, dude. It's a product of the nuclear age. The freaking 1950s. And the reason it's like that is so you could get good, like stable factory labor, because that was where the economy was. That family was designed and built by the rich specifically to aid in making us consume more and weakening people and breaking up familial bonds, because we used to be extended families, and an extended family is much stronger than a nuclear family.
So I mean, that's the critique of the nuclear family, but I think we should also, say the other half of this, which is that like you couldn't have had the nuclear family before the nuclear age because why you couldn't have had a nuclear family, during the Great Depression. You couldn't have had that be the dominant form, in like the 1920s, even, like roaring 20s, but they weren't that roaring for most people.
You couldn't have had a nuclear family during that freaking family feud where they just kept killing each other.
Yeah, well, that's very true. Would have been defenseless, but yeah. Like this is something that you could have because of the post-war economic boom, and which is a result of a bunch of things that came together in exactly the right way, including the fact that the Cold War was, in effect, a massive jobs program, right? That having this military buildup that definitely contributed to it. The fact that these industrial unions that have been built in the 30s, 40s, through all this militant labor action, meant that a lot of blue collar jobs were unionized now.
I'm glad you brought that up about it. It was Norway that didn't have the minimum wage, and you were like, "Yeah, but they're crazy unionized."
yeah, because it was Denmark, but yeah, whatever. It does I think there are like a couple of those countries that don't have the minimum wage, and they always trot that. Oh, see, you think these are they don't even have the minimum wage? Like, yeah, but that doesn't mean that like the market just sets the wage. They have a wage floor. It's just enforced by sectoral bargaining by these incredibly powerful labor unions. But like the fact that so many more workers were unionized in the 50s than had been like in previous parts of American history, the fact that the sort of military injection into the economy, the fact that like even if you had a kid going to college, hey, you've got the GI Bill, like that takes care of a lot of that. And also, I guess to be complete and accurate about this, we should also say that, it helped the economy a lot that, we just bombed out the industrial infrastructure of all our major competitors. So
That's a really good point. American cars are doing great. What happened to the Germans?
yeah, exactly. Right. There's what
about the Japanese?
Yeah, right. Exactly. So none of the former Axis powers or even countries that are allied to the United States, but that still their economies were still in shambles from the fact that that's where the war happened. You weren't gonna even in Germany or whatever, like it took them a while, to
recover.
To recover. So all of those things meant that you had this economy where you could have a single breadwinner who was actually making enough money that they could support a stay-at-home mom, and you didn't need to have grandma and grandpa living with you, so that like somebody could be looking after the kids, while mom was at the was sewing at the sweatshop, and hoping that it didn't burn down.
Yeah, not like the triangle shirtwaist. By the way, there's two quick super chats I want to get in here before we get too far, just because these people were kind enough to give me their money. So the first one is Fuzzy Slippers. When are you guys going to do a team debate? The answer is, yeah, we have. I'd be up to do another one if the opportunity comes up. But yeah, look on Modern Day Debate. It's us against Todd Lewis and Keith Preston. And we debated socialism versus, was it socialism on trial or socialism versus capitalism?
I think it was something like, can socialism innovate?
Can socialism innovate?
I actually think one problem with that debate was that it was a little unclear, like what, like I think that could potentially be a good debate, but I think that if everybody had spent a little bit more time checking out what everybody else thought in advance, probably could have been more productive.
If I'm not mistaken, yeah, because Todd's whole opening statement was on, he was just attacking the labor theory of value. in a very weird way. All right,
sure. I mean, like that has nothing to do with can socialism innovate. Like these are two entirely unrelated topics. Like you could think the labor theory of value holds up, or you could think that the labor theory of value doesn't hold up. And either way, right? Like whatever. I mean, that's just a. Anyway, that was a strange debate.
No, I think you're right. I should say, by the way, Todd is a very smart guy, and he's a good debater. He just, that debate did not go. I mean, we did well. But,
yeah, sure, but I don't think that. Like I'm happy with how it did, but I don't think that everybody's understanding of the topic was enough on the same page for it to be very satisfied overall.
Yeah, or stimulating. Yeah, I know just what you mean. And this is the second one. A lot of people don't realize that the nuclear family might have included young teenage girls with 30-plus-year-old men, since that was common back then. So first off, a lot of people do realize that, and that's one of the reasons they want it back. Unfortunately, I don't know if I've ever told this story, but I spent a good amount of my time in a small Kentucky town, and I remember a girl in my a 15-year-old was marrying a 30-plus-year-old man in my class. Like that was with parental consent and all that weird stuff. So there's a lot of people. And what was it? The guy who was beaten by Doug Jones.
No. Yeah, I know exactly who you're talking about, but I've lost it.
Yeah, I can't think of it. The famous Republican pedophile beef.
Yeah.
Alleged.
Yeah. That was like Doug Jones. I think had the all-time best campaign slogan. Doug Jones allowed in every single shopping mall in the state of Alabama.
That was phenomenal. Yeah. So that was the guy. He'd also ride in on a horse, but they know about that. Roy Moore. Yes.
Roy Moore. There we go. Yeah. It's the 10 Commandments judge. Yeah. I mean, look, I think there's plenty of the country where there are plenty of parts of the country where that still exists. Look, maybe I'm, one track mind, vulgar materialist, whatever. But my big take on all these things is always, okay, should people live in nuclear families? Should people live in extended family situations? Should mothers go to work? Should mothers stay home with the kids? Should people? Obviously there should be a age of consent, and in some of these states it's too low, but should people marry people who are older than them or not? Whatever, right? All of these questions. my big take is always, well, I mean, people should be able to do whatever they want, as long as they're consenting adults. And what's really missing in the contemporary United States and in a very different way in the 50s, but is everybody involved having the economic capacity to do whatever they want, right? So it's like, I don't want, if you're living 3 generations or 4 generations in a household, I want that to be because that's the most fulfilling way for you to live, not because you can't afford your own place. If you're if you are back at work, 6 months, 3 months, 6 weeks in some cases, really, after giving birth, I want that to be because that's where you want to be, and not because you can't afford, to stay home with your baby, and vice versa for the 50s, right? That the problem in that case is that so much of the workforce, was walled off, from women. They didn't really have the option, of going to work. But I just want everybody to be able to have enough money in their pockets that they could just do what they want.
Yeah, I feel like you, when Charlie was like, he was basically trying to get you to give examples of workplace authoritarianism.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, he thought it was just holding a gun to somebody's head. And there were two things that either he hasn't thought too far down this road, or it just never occurred to him that you can coerce a person by controlling their environment. And also that, opportunity really isn't equal, even if there's no outside force coming in. One of the examples I always give is, a homeless man and Jeff Bezos both have the same freedom to donate as much money as they want to the political candidate of their choice. Is that a meaningful freedom? No.
Yeah. No, exactly. The workplace authoritarianism part of it was weird, because I think, and that's actually where the thing about whether everybody has the ability to start their own business came up, because he was objecting to me talking about workplace authoritarianism, and it was actually one of the 2 places in the debate that he got indignant that anybody would say what I was saying. There weren't a lot of them, but there were 2. One of them was that I think the U.S. Postal Service is awesome, and he
thank you for going to bat for that blew his mind.
Yeah, he was just incredulous about that. He said he never talked to anybody who thought that. Which, by the way, I mean, my dude's gotta talk to more people, because if you actually look at polls of what Americans think about different federal agencies, the post office is way on the top of the favorability.
Great example. Snow White Zombie. The fact that I'm able to do this and Daruti and all of the stuff that I do through Kickstarter, the biggest thing that I rely on is the postal service. And if I had to pay the rates that I would have to pay through UPS or FedEx, it would I don't even know if my business model would be effective, because the post office is amazing.
Anybody whose livelihood relies on sending things through the mail, and especially if you live in an out of the way place, the idea that any private company is ever going to have an economic, that the incentives are going to line up for them to, deliver a letter from, whatever, from Newark, New Jersey to somewhere in rural Alaska for 55 cents. I don't believe that, it's just not cost efficient, to do it that way, so that's one thing, right? That this is this incredibly important public service, and that's not a special radical Marxist thing that I think. There's a reason that it like this is actually one of the only federal agencies that it says in the Constitution that we're supposed to have, because even from a sort of pragmatic capitalist point of view, this is a really important service to have.
Yeah. You should have pointed that out, by the way, in the debate that it says in the Constitution we're supposed to have.
I should have.
That would have blown his mind.
Yeah. But like, I think that the way that conservatives try to get around that as well, it says, well, technically it just says that Congress can establish it. It's like, okay, dude, like,
yeah,
what do you think the point of this was, right? Like, why is this here?
Why is it that Congress can establish that, but it doesn't explicitly say any other federal agency?
Yeah, exactly. It's not spelling out anything else because they thought this was really important and we really needed to have one of these, and they didn't want the possibility of an argument coming up in the future about whether this was a federal overreach to have a postal service. But also, like, I mean, really, like, if you, it's been over the decades. I mean, it's been a source of like good unionized jobs that'll provide a middle class income to just a vast number of people who would not have been able to get other kinds of jobs. I mean, oftentimes because of at a certain point in American history, because of racial discrimination. Honestly, like if you talk to a Black person of a certain generation who went to college, there's like at least a 50% chance that on further questioning, the reason that their family was able to afford to send them to college was that dad had a job at the post office. Like it's even the things that like conservatives are supposed to care about, mobility and all of that stuff, post office would be great. So but like he just took that, like he just reacted to that, like I just said that I love getting root canals and like I get them sometimes for fun, even when I don't need them.
I think so. This is he was kind of trying to do that trope that you see a lot of really bad comedians do in the 90s, where they're like, oh, you want the government to run healthcare. Do you like the DMV? Like he was doing that, but he didn't want to say the DMV. So he said the post office, because the only thing he's thought about it with regard to it is, oh, sometimes I don't get my mail. And like,
which by the way, I think that made me curious enough to look up some of these numbers later. And USPS, I think, loses a slightly bigger proportion, although it's also really hard to track. But like FedEx, like it's definitely in the same ballpark. The packages that they lose. And also it's worth noting that like a lot of, like when you want to talk, people will bring up like Amazon, doing their own delivery and stuff, but like Amazon and a lot of other companies, like part of the cheat code is that they also rely on the postal service for a lot of what they do. Because
it's wonderful for any kind of business that has to ship things.
Yeah, exactly. But
so this is the post office hour between Ben and Brent, where we just talk about the post office and how great it is.
Exactly. So which by the way, it might have changed in 2020 because there was like a minute where Trump was demonizing it, and maybe like more conservatives.
I forgot about that. You're right.
With that, but like. I think the poll I was looking at from 2019, like even most grassroots conservatives like the postal service, right? I mean, this isn't like this is about as apple pie a consensus thing as you should be able to find.
Well, the postal service employs like a ton of veterans,
right?
Like, the military to postal service is like a straight up pipeline. So
exactly. But I think that But on the workplace authoritarianism thing, that was another one where he was like just indignant that I would say that like workplaces were, and he was like, are you really saying that, most people, more than 50%, right, are workplace they're authoritarian. And then what kind of came out was that the reason he objected to that was basically, because like whether a workplace is authoritarian or not, that's just a question of the structure. That's not
Yeah.
about like whether the boss is a good person or a bad person. Like,
Yeah,
that's
and it's not about whether you're forced to take the job or not. It's about how the job runs.
yeah, no, exactly. Well, actually, right. Like, I mean, I would say, right, that like, the Catholic Church is a pretty authoritarian institution. Nobody's like, there's certainly been times in history where this is not the case, but like in the 21st century, right? Nobody is being forced to participate in it. But if you do, right, it's a pretty authoritarian institution.
There's the Pope. I hear he's a big deal.
Yeah, like that, that there is like, ultimately one guy at the top, who gets to decide what, a lot of what happens. And your people at lower levels are supposed to obey what people at higher levels do. But like what he was really saying is two things. One is that people that is voluntary, so that's okay. And then the other one was, the people who are
voluntary.
Yeah, right, which is part of what we were arguing about, right? But then the other related one is that people who are running businesses should get to run businesses because they deserve it, because they took entrepreneurial risk. And this also speaks to the voluntariness point, because if you think that anybody could do that, then it's becomes more plausible to say that, well, you just chose not to start your own business. You chose to go to work for somebody else's business. And this is where the point about whether anybody could do it comes up. And the only sense in which he seemed to be willing to concede that not everybody could do it is that not everybody would have like business savvy or something like that, right? Which, of course, it's true. Like skills
more than business savvy, though, is $30,000 in liquid capital.
No, exactly. That's the point. That it's like people, if you have, whether or not like, yes, certainly there are skills that go into run a successful business. Nobody's denying that, and certainly those skills, like all skills, are unequally distributed. By the way, that itself should be a problem from a perspective of people shouldn't, have less resources or less power because of things outside of their control. Because what skills you have is to a great extent outside of your control, right? You don't. Nobody decides I would really like it if I were bad at school and like I just don't want to test well, like nobody's making these decisions by and large. This is any more than you're deciding like, I don't want to be tall enough, to be good at basketball, right? Or I don't want to be coordinated enough to be good at it. So I
don't want to be good at basketball. You
that's
just a sport that doesn't interest me.
But like, you probably don't decide that you want to be bad at it. But like the more important, as you say, this is the much less important point, which is why I didn't really fight about that in the debate. The much more important point is, even in the sense in which he thinks that everybody could do it, no, not everybody could do that. And when he was trying to make his case that everybody could do it, he said, well, if you're really willing to hustle and do this and that and take out a second mortgage on your house.
Oh, this was beautiful.
I was like, wait a second, Charlie, you think about what you just said. This assumes that everybody A, owns their own house, and B, that their finances, their credit is good enough that they would be approved for that second mortgage. They there are tens of millions of American adults who do not fit into either of these categories.
Yeah. Well, yeah. In fact, there was one thing I wish that you had brought up, because before the pandemic, I don't know how bad it is now, but the average American couldn't handle an unforeseen $500 expense. And I think the average American is something close to $5,000 in credit card debt at this point. So how the hell is everybody going to get the $30,000 of liquid capital that, on average you need to start a new successful business? I mean, that's why most businesses fail, is undercapitalization. And he even said it too. This was not picked out, and I don't blame you for not picking out, because I think you were just there was too much there. But like he said, what about the guy who didn't pay himself for 2 years? How much money does that guy have?
If you didn't pay yourself for 2 years, that suggests that you have either, you have enough money in the bank that you can go 2 years without paying yourself any new income without starving to death, or you're certainly not going to get government assistance for those 2 years, or you're married to somebody who has enough income they could do that, or whatever, right? Your parents, how like that.
So is he really suffering by not paying himself for 2 years?
Yeah, I mean, they're like even if you are cutting a lot of quarters to make that work, like just the fact that you're financially capable of doing that already puts you in a category that most people are not really in.
That actually reminds me too, because he said this, and this was fascinating. He said that you guys were talking about universal health care, and he was trying to make some moralistic point, I think, about the person who saves. He really loves saving money, which is weird because we need people to spend money to keep the economy going. But he really was big on the moral worth of the person who scrimps and saves money. And he's like, what about the person that saves their entire life, and in the event that they might get sick, and he said something like $750,000 saved up or something, and then they get sick, are you going to deny them the chance to spend that money on getting better?
Yeah, because that's what people really want. Just if at all possible, if I get sick, I really want you to at least do me the courtesy of spending my life savings on this. I definitely don't want to just have this taken care of so I can spend that money on something else.
Yeah.
That.
And that was the one thing. I wish you'd caught it, and I wish you'd just been like, well, wouldn't it be better if they spent that $750,000 or whatever he said on something they actually like after taking care for the doctor? Oh my God.
No, exactly. I don't think anybody in Canada or the UK or Denmark or any of these other countries is upset that they were denied that opportunity. but also this is a really important point, because he said, well, somebody who whatever they somebody
put this on the
yes, exactly.
Imagine the savings.
Somebody who's he said something like somebody who smokes and they eat shit and they do would they don't take care of themselves, and they're really fat and whatever, that I think that they made all these irresponsible decisions and they should just have their health care paid for. And I did point out in response, well, the only difference between that and what we have right now is that right now you'd have to add one thing to your description, which is somebody who doesn't watch what they eat, smokes, etc., and also is rich enough that they can afford world-class health care. And nobody's denied healthcare in the current system because they made irresponsible life choices. They're denied healthcare because they don't have enough money.
What was really interesting too, because he made a couple of kind of allusions to religion. And it amazes me that he's sitting there and he's like, well, what about a person who does all this stuff that I don't like? I guess they should die. That is definitely playing God. With the whole thing of and I think he even did it. He got mad at John Dewey. And he thought that you were really up bonds about Woodrow Wilson or something, because Ben Burgis works at a college. Woodrow Wilson worked at a college. Clearly, oh my God, this is like thinking black people are related.
yeah. It's well, so who else worked at a college? Newt Gingrich. He was a history professor. In fact,
it must have been insufferable.
in the same state that I'm in now, so it's an even closer relationship than Wilson. By the way, fun fact: Newt Gingrich's doctoral dissertation was about the Belgian Congo, and I think it was kind of a whitewash, but also in the 2012 like Republican primaries, he ran this crazy ad where that was like about how Mitt Romney was exactly like John Kerry, and like it was going through all these parallels between them. And the last moment of the ad was like, and like Kerry, and then you have this, there's this little clip, Mitt Romney, he speaks French, which is awesome in itself, right? That speaking French is like a bad thing, right? In the world commercial. Also, unless he was committing academic fraud, he could not have written that dissertation without at least reading French.
What the heck is he doing writing about how is he writing about the Belgian Congo? I mean, I guess maybe he thought Leopold II didn't kill enough people or something. Like,
yeah.
How do you read about the Belgian Congo and not become anti-capitalist?
Right. Yeah, no, you think so. Although that was also a weird thing in general about conservative politics under Obama. Like Glenn Beck and people like that would say that Obama was this this Kenyan anti-colonialist. It's like, I don't know, isn't anti-colonialism good? I mean, I thought everybody agreed with that. Like at this point, I mean, like we're in the 21st century, there's still people defending that one, like that. I thought we sort of agreed that this was bad. But yeah, so in that healthcare piece, he actually said, oh, so you think that that people who have more money shouldn't be able to get better stuff. Now, I mean, I guess to be fair, I mean, this is the one place I could be accused of being slightly evasive because I didn't want to get into the bigger thing. Like, the full answer is yeah. I mean, ideally, right? Like, like I would, if we're talking about extremely long-term goals here, but like, yeah, like if we, I mean, I would like to live in it, like, as long as it's consistent with, with everybody having enough to go around, right? Like with that Marx line about how communism, without enough economic development is just the equal distribution of misery, right? So there's a lot of caveats and assumptions here, but yeah, ideally, right? I'd like to live in a society that was as materially egalitarian as was at all reasonably possible, where
I mean, I'll go further than you on that, Ben, because I think I'm a little more radical on this end, and it kind of comes from my Buddhism. I actually think too much money is bad, actually. And like he talked about like, oh, well, the reason you want to become Jeff Bezos is so you can leave a fortune to your children. I'm like, no, that's horrible. You will destroy the kid.
Yeah. Well, I mean, sure, you can probably get to the point where, right, that's how Hunter Biden happens. But
Hunter Biden, Bill Gates, like,
yeah. No. I think if you live in an extremely inegalitarian society where, like, practically everything, very much including the cooperation of other human beings, is for sale, then if you're born with a giant pile of money, then that, like, so everybody is just kissing your ass all the time, and like you can get them to do whatever you want, more or less. Then like, yeah, you probably are going to turn out to be a terrible person under those circumstances. Yeah. I think we'd have to go a long way to get to the point where there was so much to I actually don't know even how that would work, because I think the real thing that actually makes you grow up to be a shitty failed human being is being raised with tons of money in a society where other people don't have very much money, which means that you can buy them.
Yeah. Well, it's not even just that. Like, this is kind of core to one of my philosophies, but I genuinely believe that the only way we can get better is to meet with obstacles and resistance. It's the process of becoming a better actualized human is to face obstacles and to refuse to be defeated by them. And in much the same way as, you work with weights, you can't build your muscles if you're not lifting a heavy weight. You can't develop your mind or develop your character if you don't have challenges. and kind of snow plowing your kid is a terrible idea, like just across the board. I think in a way, I think too much money and too much privilege just rots a person's brain. Or as Bakunin said, actually, it is the characteristic of privilege in every privileged position to kill the mind and soul of man.
But I think the two are related, because the reason that the thing that I think really allows people to navigate life with too little pushback is in the position of having just vastly more money than the people outside of your family or whatever, and your social circle, who you're going to come into contact with, because you can, like if you get pulled over, no problem, because like the speeding tickets, the fines are set at a level that would be a punishment for normal people. Like, you're not going to notice it, if like that, it's the contrast, I think, that leads to that. But in
or you get something like that affluenza, where the kid like killed the guy and more or less got away with it because he was just too wealthy.
No, exactly. Like it's the power, I think, ultimately that's the problem. That, like, in I guess in the Hunter Biden case, it's a combination of money and political influence, but
power, privilege, money, political influence. I would assume there's probably problems at home just in general, but
the point is just, like, Hunter gets into trouble, he's not going to get in that much trouble. Is you can buy your way out of it, or call in political favors your way out of it, or a little bit of both. And ultimately you'll be fine. Whereas,
and you notice he's mad at Hunter Biden. He's not mad at Donald Trump Jr.
Well, right. I mean, whatever. I mean, I have a, clearly, he's clearly not a, very, successful, human, but like I can at least appreciate there's a certain amount of, like, pathos about, like, Hunter Biden. Like, I kind of like him as a literary character.
Yes, I would read a book about Hunter Biden.
Totally. Whereas Eric and John Jr. just seemed like, man, I like, if you had to spend 10 minutes in the room with these kids, like, you'd be going crazy, because, like, they just seem like dial tones. So yeah, I mean, I'm with you there, but
I can kind of confirm that, by the way, because my cousin went to school with Donald Trump Jr. and did not have good things to say.
I'm sure, right? But I mean, like, the point, like, in the healthcare case, is it's like, I mean, we could have spent like half an hour talking about, like, economic incentives, and, like, and how equal, resources could be realistically distributed, and all that stuff. But that just seemed like one of those things where you got to pick your battles in the moment, and it's like, look, I'm not talking about whether everybody can, buy an equally nice car. Right. I'm talking about whether some people have preferential access to life-saving medical treatment. That should definitely not depend on how much money is in your bank account.
It definitely shouldn't. And that was a really good point on your part. And, there was something about the debate that kind of really got me from the very beginning. And I've heard this so many times from libertarians. And I'm glad you guys did not jump down this rabbit hole, because one of the things that I really want to praise you for in this is you kept control of the debate, and you kept it in practical things and arguments that I think could potentially reach his audience of populists. The ones who are going to think more critically about this stuff, the people who actually are experiencing economic pressure and are smart enough to understand where it may be coming from, and perhaps it's not coming from the fact that they're just not, upstanding enough. And
Which is also, I've got to say, a benefit of Trash and Poor Hunter a little bit, because because I think that the way that the right-wing economic populism works is that you basically you do two things, right? You redirect from economics to culture as much as you possibly can, every opportunity. That we should have a higher minimum wage. Well, I love families. I mean, there should everybody should have health care. Well, I don't think I should have to use everybody's pronouns. Like that. Like that's the first thing you do, and then the second thing that you do is you try to contrast, the salt of the earth, middle American struggling, little guy with elites, where by elites you basically mean like people who live on coasts who are part of the Democratic Party and the media and and all of that stuff. So I think if you could be like, hey, I don't particularly like the Biden family, and also I think you should be paid more and you shouldn't have to pay for healthcare. Like if anything, if anything's going to get through, that's got to be the combination, right?
Yeah. I would agree. I think that would get through, but what was interesting to me, like just from my own selfish perspective, this is something, and like even if I were to debate him, I don't know if I'd go into this because again, it's very abstract. But his stuff with natural rights, just oh my god.
Yeah. So this was the other half, right? So so the originally constituted topic was democratic socialism, or if you're Charlie Kirk, Democrat socialism, versus Trumpian populism. I noticed that he switched that when he introduced it at the beginning to conservative populism. I don't know if that's significant, but democratic socialism versus Trumpian or conservative or whatever populism. And so like the main point from my perspective was to show that there's absolutely nothing populist about this guy and what he stands for. And the first hour was pretty solidly about that and kept on track. Second one, all right, we're in the bonus hour anyway. He's asked me a bunch of philosophy questions. And so
I feel like he just really wants to take your class.
and he does. There's this whole weird thing where he thinks that like Marx was a Hegelian and which
that was weird when he was starting to try to do the Hegelian points.
Yeah, I think this is James Lindsay's influence that he's that he's taught conservatives to think that like Hegel's the father of all evil. But
Marxists tend to consider Hegel like an idealist, don't they?
Well, no. Well, Hegel is an idealist, right? Literally his. That's not a like literally his view of history is that is that history is the emergence of the world spirit, through changes in cultures and all this stuff. It's. He's a he's like the sort of pinnacle of the German idealist tradition, and Marx starts out as a Hegelian, but in becoming a Marxist, right, he's rejected Hegel in favor of a materialist view of history. So it's sort of got the same structure to it, but the content is very, very different, right? So there's some weird stuff like that. But in the but like we'd already been off on all these weird rabbit holes, and we were way off. We sort of wandered back to the topic every once in a while, but in the bonus half we were all over the place anyway. So like I sort of do the self-indulgent thing because I've seen him make these claims in like at least a couple of those other debates that I mentioned. Like if he's debating somebody and they use the phrase the social contract, he'll say, there is no social contract. Our rights come from God. And so I
agree with the first statement. I do not agree with the second statement.
We were, So I really wanted to, because that, just the philosophy nerd in me, that drove me crazy every time I heard it, So all right, we're getting to the end of the second half. We've already done a lot of philosophy things, got off topic anyway. Like, so I did like, okay, like, help me understand this, Charlie, right? Like, in what sense do our rights come from God? Because you clearly don't mean that God is like intervening in the world to make sure that we have those rights. Because, I mean, it's not the case that, like, as the Chinese Communist Party tries to jail dissidents, and like there are bolts of lightning to like stop them from doing it, right? Like, so our rights clearly aren't given to us by God in that sense. So it seems like what you must really mean is the reason why it would be morally unjust for us to be denied these rights is that God wants us to have them. But if so, like, this is like the least original thing I said in the whole deal. I mean, this is like a 3,000-year-old argument, but okay, so it's the Euthyphro dilemma. This Socrates is arguing with Euthyphro about the definition of holiness, and Euthyphro says the holy is that which the gods love, and Socrates says, okay, but do the gods love it because it is holy, or is it holy because the gods love it? And translated into this, it's does God want us to have these rights because it would be unjust to deny them, or to violate them, or is it unjust to violate them just because God wants us to have these rights? And if the only reason that if God has a reason for wanting this, right? If God wants us to have these rights because it would be unjust to deny them, then whatever reason that it would be unjust is going to be just as available to the atheist or the agnostic or the Hindu or whatever, right? As it is to somebody who believes in Abraham.
Speaking of which, I have noticed several videos covering this, and I don't know if they're ones that Charlie has put out, but they've definitely been put out by his fans, where they're like, atheist, Marxist, Ben Burgis.
Yeah.
I really want to poison that well.
Yeah. See I think the one on the TPUSA channel was a little bit more neutral. It was Charlie Kirk versus socialist professor Ben Burgis. Although it's still a little funny, it makes it sound like I'm a professor of socialism. But
there's some professor, by the way, I just found out about this. There's like a professor who's like been gaining traction, and literally this guy, I don't know where he teaches, but I think he's actively trying to turn himself into Karl Marx. Like, he's got the hair, he's got the beard, it's all white, and I'm just like looking at this and I'm like, who are you?
Yeah, it is something I've noticed a lot in the last couple of years, by the way, of doing these, that there are always like any kind of debate that I'm doing with the right winger where it's been mentioned at some point what my job is, a day job is. There are always people like right wingers in the comments who are like, oh my God, can you just imagine him indoctrinating his students with this? It's like how do you think college works? Do you think that just classes, like if somebody takes somebody takes like intro to philosophy or symbolic logic or something, do you like that we're just like, I'm just like ranting at them about politics all day?
Yeah. Well, no, because that's what they'd do if they were in your position. Like, first off, you got to think, like, how many times does like somebody's crazy uncle forward them something about this awful atheist professor who was challenged by his student, and that student was Albert Einstein? Kevin Sorbo played Ben Burgis in like that God's Not Dead.
Yeah. No, for sure. I mean, look, nobody's I'm not like taught. I mean, up until it got to the point where I was doing so much public stuff that like I kind of gave up on it, because it's like, already everybody has Google, right? Like this. But like up until then, like, I mean, I would never like mention any of this stuff in class. And then at that point, like I got a little bit more relaxed about it, right? It's like I can kind of say what I do when I'm not there, but like that still doesn't mean that like, hey, today in symbolic logic, we're going to talk about, the Marxist theory of history, right? I mean, like and every intro to philosophy or intro to ethics class I've ever heard of, like you always assign readings on both sides of the argument, right? I mean, so it's like this idea that it's just going to be political indoctrination.
Well, and so this actually kind of goes back to Charlie Kirk, though, because his whole thing was like, don't go to college,
right?
Because you'll be turned into an evil leftist, like by the professors and their dark spells. Like, really, like, here's the thing. So, yeah, I got more liberal in college, and it had nothing to do with being indoctrinated by professors. It had to do with meeting people from different walks of life and from involving myself in a profession that made me have to engage my empathy more often. Like when you're learning theater, you're learning to understand character. You have to become less judgmental, because if you stay locked in just your perspective, you can't convincingly play any characters, and so like, yeah. And that's me doing like freaking like hippy dippy theater school. But like at the same time, like, I went to, I remember I was working at Baruch College, and there was an economics professor. I didn't know anything about him other than he was an economics professor. We'd pass each other in the hallways sometime. And I was really into Occupy at this point, because it was around 2012. And I asked him, Karl Marx had, in one of his books I'd read, he made this point about like how the price of one commodity affects the price of every other commodity, like within a market. So the price of silver goes up, the price of silk falls, I think was the example he used. I go up to this professor and I'm like, hey, you're an economics professor. I had a question about this. So is there any empirical evidence about whether Marx was right or wrong about price of silver goes up, price of silk falls? And the professor looked at me for a second and then told me to read Milton Friedman. So obviously people are not like, getting indoctrinated by evil leftist professors across the country.
Well, I mean, okay. So, I mean, there is also, I think, a slightly different thing going on there, which is that like, even, I mean, I think the number of actual like Marxist professors is extremely low. I certainly never felt, as a graduate student or adjunct or professor or anything, like I never felt like I had as much company as all that. But but also like even in colleges where like 95% of the faculty is pretty liberal, econ professors tend to be pretty pretty right wing, which I think has a lot. I mean, Richard Wolff talks a lot about this, the way that the sort of long-term effects of leftists being purged, from that field, in the Cold War. But anyway, yeah. So TPUSA just did Socialist College Professor. Charlie on his own channel, he did do Charlie Kirk versus Marxist atheist professor, Ben Burgis, which, yeah, all three of those are accurate, but you put them together that way, it feels like it might as well be, Charlie Kirk, versus, fast talking big city Jew, Ben Burgis.
Yeah. It seems like that was what he was going for. Just, oh my gosh. It really, honestly, it almost made me think of like when you were on the Hake program. And
yes.
Is that a Jew? Are you one of them Jews? He doesn't sound like that.
No, but that was kind of like Hake is really weird because he's this really disconcerting combination of being like the sort of calmest, most polite fascist you're ever going to meet.
Yeah. Calmest, most polite, but then like the stuff that comes out of his mouth.
Yeah, it's like wait, did I hear that right? That can't be right.
And and of course the whole thing, they indoctrinate their audience to think that anger is unmasculine, And so like I think that's part of the game, is like they say this really awful stuff with a really, happy face, and they watch the other person get outraged, and it just feeds their audience.
Wow.
Yeah, that's my supposition. I don't know if they're doing it necessarily on purpose, or if they just fell into it. Because I talked with Hank, and we actually had a pretty good conversation. But yeah, his views are off the freaking wall.
Yeah. No. Yes, very much so. Like at the, like the sort of, like it's like I don't know, man. I mean, have you ever thought about like how maybe like the Civil Rights Act should be repealed, and maybe, and what if I want to put a whites only sign in my window? It's like, yeah.
So to bring this back to the natural rights thing, and you're right, there's no grounding for it. So like my view on natural rights, because I hear this argument all the time, is like, okay, if natural rights are real and exist in nature, you should be able to demonstrate them to me, like in a laboratory. Go find me the right to life, that I may examine it and realize that this is indeed the objective right to life. And like, I totally get it. Like, I think abolitionists use natural rights arguments, and they're really more like should statements, like we should have these. And they're saying like, okay, people have a natural right to self-ownership, therefore you shouldn't, own slaves. I think people shouldn't own slaves. I don't think that's a good argument for it, but like at that day and age when people thought you could own slaves, sure, fine, use that argument, abolitionists. But I feel like where we are within our society today, like it seems like they're just trying to transpose. It's like the intelligent design version of God-given rights. So and he even did it both ways, where we have these natural rights that were given by God. So he's appealing to the religious conservatives and to the nut job libertarians.
Well, I think so. Natural rights is a phrase that I think oftentimes just means that you have certain rights, and they're not like, it's like natural as opposed to social. That you have certain rights, and that's not a function of like any sort of social or legal institution. It like supersedes that, or it's prior to that, or something like that, which is fine. Like that's, I mean, I could go along with that, but like that, but then I think the problem is that sometimes when people say things like that, they're that explicit. They're talking about, that they're sort of see their view of rights within like a natural law framework, which is very explicitly what Charlie Kirk is doing. It's actually kind of weird because he's an evangelical Protestant, but whenever he talks about philosophy, like he sounds like an old school Catholic. So
I'm not convinced that that's not entirely by design.
Yeah, because it's like he could, like the way he talks about natural law, and he'll even like reference like Aristotle and Aquinas and St. Augustine and stuff, and it's like it would not sound any like the Catholic version of him on this stuff would not sound any different. But so I don't know if that's a play for like that part of the conservative audience, or if that's just like for whatever weird reason what he was, the version of this stuff he was exposed to, or what's going on there. But like then like say, okay, natural law, what do we mean by natural law? And I think oftentimes it means maybe a few different, there are like a few different things it could mean. And I think oftentimes, at least on a popular level, it means some weird combination of all three, or, it sort of goes back and forth. And so a lot of time, so because there is like the least ridiculous version of it, right, is the sort of most like Aristotelian version, which is that, well, there are this sort of natural facts about how it is that like which things will lead to you having like a good flourishing life, right? Yeah. That's and that the whatever counts as a virtue is going to be the thing that, and so and you could do maybe like a religious tie-in where you say, well, okay, God created nature, so whatever, like that's that, but ultimately God is kind of redundant in this picture.
You don't need God for that argument.
Totally right. It doesn't really matter how how human psychology and whatever got to be this way. It is. So here's the stuff. So that's one version. Another version is that natural law, like the natural law, is basically just the part of God's will about how we're supposed to live that's supposed to be somehow manifest in nature. And this is, like oftentimes the importance of talking about natural law for them is that, and again, Charlie in this, like, very funny, right? Like he's like an evangelical Thomist, but he's he was kind of laying this out. It was like off topic when he brought it up, but like he was kind of laying this out that like this sort of traditionalist kind of Augustine Aquinas kind of view that even the heathens who haven't heard the good word of Christ can discover what's right and wrong because they can discover it in nature, which is really weird, right? Like
that is incredibly weird because nature's weird, man.
Well, that's the thing, and so that then shades into the third and most ridiculous thing that people can mean when they talk about natural law, which is that nature itself is somehow a guide to what's morally right and wrong. So that like
naturalistic fallacy.
Yeah, if something's unnatural, that's therefore it's immoral, which is a fucking insane thing to think because, like, I mean, this used to be, fortunately, I think the culture has kind of made enough progress in the last 10 years. This would probably be less likely to come up today. But back in like 2009, 2011, when I was in grad school, just immediately afterwards, I was a adjunct, instructor at Miami-Dade College, which is like a giant community college system in the Miami area. It's if you watch Scarface, there's a line of dialogue where it's mentioned that his sister is taking classes at MDC. So, but when I was teaching there back, a little over a decade ago, this was back when conservatives were still hot and bothered about gay marriage, much more so than they are now. And so this would come up sometimes, and in that context it would come up, and then the other context which it would come up would be like if we were reading like Peter Singer's stuff about vegetarianism, people would be like, well, but animals eat other animals, it's natural, or with the the gay thing, they say, oh, but this the homosexuality is unnatural, and like this is a reason to think
very
that it's
natural,
wrong.
But we have gay penguins, that's the thing. So
yeah, sure, I've yeah, for sure. But like, also, like, what does it matter? Why is that relevant? Like because the idea that what exists in nature is going to tell you anything about what would be right or wrong for humans to do, right? Like, here are things that are all over the place in nature: rape, cannibalism, like killing people over territory, like all those things are all over the place in nature. That there are, infanticide.
What is it? Christopher Hitchens used to make this point. Like there's those worms that like eat infant eyes.
Yeah.
Is God? Well, and this I actually,
here are some things that don't exist in nature: schools, hospitals, reading. That's having like basically like there's a very long list of things that do not exist in nature that, like, if you think that there's anything that we should be collectively proud of as a species, it's pretty much all the stuff that's on the list.
Yeah. By the way, do you know what does exist in nature? Trans folk. Like, and this is like the weirdest thing, because I've said this a number of times, is that Mother Nature is a mad scientist and she doesn't care about our human ideas about how things should be. She's going to do a bunch of weird stuff and we kind of just have to roll with it a lot of the time. So we've been at this for a while. I don't want to keep you too
Sure.
long, Ben. This is a fascinating thing to talk about, and really, I feel very privileged to be the person to go over this with you, because this was a big debate, and you did amazingly. You controlled it
Okay.
from beginning to end. You were more prepared. Like, you're always prepared, but you were more prepared than I've ever seen you. I don't think I saw him get you on anything. Do you feel like there was a weak point in the debate where you felt a little unmoored? And
Yeah.
where was Ben the weakest in Ben's mind?
Yeah. I mean, whatever. I mean, I felt very good about it. And I also think that, if you look at where the debate is posted on Charlie's channel or on the TPUSA channel, like I see people saying like, oh, Charlie totally won or whatever, because like they'll say, right? But
Yeah.
I don't see anybody like naming specific examples, right? I don't see anybody saying, "Oh, remember when you totally got him on," right?
Yeah.
Like there's a conspicuous absence of
Yeah.
that, right? So I feel good about that. I think one thing, I guess the two things I'd maybe mention are, there was one thing that I think that he seemed to be misconstruing, and I like it just very much wasn't what like I wanted to get into. So like I kind of let it go by. And there was actually a very closely related moment much later in the debate where he said some really weird stuff, and like I kind of saw it going by, and I was like, should I say something?
Yeah,
So both of them were about COVID, basically.
He was mad at, he didn't want the money going to Fauci.
Yeah. He made a bunch of COVID references. He said things like, "Oh, I don't want the money going to Fauci." He said, like when he was coming up with examples of pharmaceutical companies being bad, it was like Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca. It's like what list is that? But so there was all that, right?
Which is by the way, I just gotta say, it's so weird to see them, because if Donald Trump had won, this would be the Trump vaccine, and they would love it. I guarantee you, every single one of them, especially Charlie Kirk.
Oh, no question. I mean, like they would absolutely love it. And like the weird thing is that it's been so memory hold that like Donald Trump was pushing how wonderful it's going to be when we develop this vaccine. We're doing Operation Warp Speed. He had he talked it up as an accomplishment, when it was ready. And it's so weird that that's all like disappeared from the conservative collective psyche. That it's like they're listening to them now, like you really think that like the COVID vaccine was Nancy Pelosi's idea, but
yeah,
so that's super weird. Like in general, the way that COVID has gotten to be mixed up with the culture war is just super weird all around. Like that, like it's what you like, because like if there's anything that like it would be very easy to imagine being a totally apolitical subject, it would be just this like
the horrible disease.
that's like a public health emergency. But and it's like, don't get me wrong, I think that the stupidity is like very, I mean, it's definitely disproportionately on the right, but it's but like also, there's a weird like there's a weird way that like, because of the way the politics played out, like liberals will do this virtue signaling kind of like, well, I'm triple vax, but I'm also gonna wear 5 masks layered on top of each other for the next 10 years because this is the way of signaling that I have that I have the right values about this stuff. And I often wonder, like, if Trump had a totally different approach to COVID, if he'd
not, for instance, blocked masks to American families, arguably making him a mass murderer due to
I mean, I think Trump definitely committed mass murder by criminal negligence with his COVID response. But if he'd gone in the other direction, if he'd been like, if he'd been all about lockdowns and like he'd actually taken the opportunity to do what like Viktor Orban did in Hungary, and like sort of like done a big power grab using COVID as an excuse. If he'd done all of that, I always wonder, it's like, okay, so how would this play out, right? Like would there be like a shit ton of liberal anti-maskers, because I can kind of imagine
there absolutely would be. There would be so many liberal anti-maskers. There would be a lot of people refusing the vaccine, thinking of it as the Trump vaccine. Clearly, it's a bad vaccine because it was developed by Operation Warp Speed. You would have the flip side of this, and it would be really dumb and annoying.
Yeah, I think that's right. So both were related to COVID, but in different ways. So the one in the first part of the debate, and I was actually really, like, the thing leading up to it, I was actually really proud of. I was really happy about this because, like, I watched 4 of his previous debates. Like, I knew a lot of what he was going to say. And,
yes, you did. You were very prepared.
And so, like, something, and like I looked up a bunch of the things that he always says, and so he said like something he loves to do, all of his Trump era debates, he did this, was that he loves to talk up how low the Black unemployment rate and the Hispanic unemployment rate, were in the Trump economy.
Yeah.
And so I looked it up, and like I was a little disappointed that he didn't specifically mention those metrics, because I had both of those in my back pocket. Like, I actually knew what the Hispanic unemployment rate was, before Trump. But like, he did at one point, he wasn't as fine-grained about it this time, but he did talk about the fact that under Trump, according to him, we had it was great because we had we had this wonderful employment numbers because of Trump's new emphasis on entrepreneurship, which is the shit that conservatives love to say.
Oh my God.
And it's like, okay, literally, like, it's pretty much the same story relative to higher starting points for the Black and Hispanic unemployment rates, but the overall civilian unemployment rate in the United States in 2009, when the effects of the crash, were kind of at their height, it was about 10%, and over the course of the Obama administration, it went from 10% to 4.7, and then in Trump, it went from 4.7 to 3.5 before COVID wrecked it again.
Yeah.
And then, like, but the way I put that, like, I think made it seem like I was maybe making more of a concession than I meant to, because, like I said, like, went from 4.7 to 3.5. So it's clearly just like a little bit more of a continuation of the much bigger shift that had already happened, right? But like, that was the overall point. But then I sort of said something like, well, we'll give him a pass on the COVID part. And he was like, thank you. I was like, well, okay. I didn't literally.
Yeah, you didn't mean to give him a pass. Well, you can give him a pass on the unemployment numbers for COVID, because that's not his fault. But we don't give him a pass on everything else.
Yeah, and
but
also,
Charlie was just like genuinely like, thank you, Ben. Thank you. Yeah. As if you were going to go in there and blame Donald Trump for bad unemployment during COVID.
Yeah, I mean, no matter how you slice it, right, that was going to have a horrible effect, right? On the economy, because obviously there are all these things that aren't happening, because everybody's locked down. But I will say that I do think that the reason I regret putting it that way a little bit is because it's, even though there would have been, like, Bernie Sanders could have been president, right? And when COVID happened, if you assume for the sake of whatever, like, there's a complicated argument there, but like, let's say something very similar, COVID played out pretty much the way it did, then obviously that would have like wrecked, the employment numbers, at least short term. But also, I do think that that what Trump did made it worse, not just in the public health sense, which obviously we just both said that he was engaged in mass murder, criminal negligence, right? But like but also economically, because the two aren't entirely separable, right? I mean, if the public health stuff is a mess, the economy is not going to is not going to come back, the way it should. And I mean, like on some models, I guess we'll never know, right? But like some of the models that epidemiologists will give us, like we could have like literally like locking down a couple weeks earlier, would have made a giant difference. And
again, I'll point at Vietnam. Now they had a tougher time with Delta, but even that, nowhere near what we've had to deal with the standard wild type COVID, which sounds like a Pokemon. But like, yeah, Vietnam, like they lost 35 people to the original strain of COVID. 35. And everybody's like, oh, Vietnam's such a small country. No, they're 1/3 the size of the United States. There was actually, I kid you not.
So the equivalent would be we lost a little over 100 people in the entirety of the United States.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If we had followed, standard, if we'd done what Vietnam had done, and we couldn't because of capitalism and the incentive structure and the idiots we had in charge. But like, obviously, it would have been within our power to actually do that. Lose 100 people to it.
Yeah, and then the other thing was in the second half, like he went like full conspiracy theorist about COVID for like.
Oh, he did.
He's kind of. I mean, well, not full, but like he got much more explicit. Like, so he had. Because for a lot of the debate, he was making like a stray comment here and there that was like kind of playing with that. But then like there was this moment in the second half where he just like came out and said like, I guess technically it was still in just asking questions mode, but he, because we, that's right. It was after he gave the list of the evil pharmaceutical companies that was like Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca. And I said, well, that's an interesting list. And then he said, well, as if this wasn't obviously what I meant, right? He said, well, those are the vaccine manufacturers. And I said, well, this is actually a perfect example of what I was talking about when we were arguing about medical innovation earlier, because the vaccine research, was largely funded by the state, it was just the profits, privatized. And he said, well, that might make you wonder whether, it's entirely on the up and up or something like that. I don't remember exactly what he said, but like somehow or another, his implication was government research money meant that like maybe the vaccine was fake or something. And it was one of those things that's like, it's like, all right, I can kind of see this like floating by. And it's like, do I get into this right now? And then he 5 seconds later, he kind of saved me from having to make that decision by being like, okay, we're not going to talk about that right now. And then he said his next thing. And I guess I could have, because there were a bunch of other points in the debate where I basically did this. Like he'd sort of made a point and then tried to move on right away. And I was like, no, we're going to talk about this.
We got to go back to this.
Like, so I could have done that there. And I'm a little ambivalent about it, but I think it was probably the right call, because like I like what I wanted to do, like the primary thing I wanted to do in the debate was to show like, okay, this guy says he's a populist, but like
he wants you dead.
Yeah, he's exactly. Like he would be dead if you can't afford preventive health care. And that's like the main thing I wanted to do. And then like as a sort of secondary thing, he makes a lot of weird comments about philosophy. And I sort of wanted to, to get in some points about that. But like, and that just felt like if I got into it, then like however much time was in the debate would have been.
It would just be, yeah.
Nothing.
And I honestly think it was better for you because he was platforming you to his audience at this point. Because I figure like not a lot of, the Ben Burgis viewers, you guys are tuning in on GTAA. So like,
right.
You have just exposed a number of, TPUSA fans, which I assume are just boomers, but to actual socialism for the first time in their life. Because they don't see that on mainstream media, they don't really see it anywhere other than like out of context clips. So to actually get you on there and to have you control the conversation like you did, and to, you know, express these ideas in very simple terms that people can actually understand, I think was absolutely invaluable. So, you know, hats off to you for that.
I appreciate that. And like, again, I feel weird about it because it's just like such a crazy thing to like not engage with, but also, I think maybe it goes back to the point about how COVID has become a culture war issue, that like, that this is kind of like, I think there's probably something to be said for having the debate that you want to have, not the debate that the other person wants to have, you know? So like, if it's, you know, the debate.
That's what I did with Stefan Molyneux.
You know, the debate I want to have is about healthcare and stuff and the minimum wage and all that stuff. And the debate he wants like this stuff, like these guys love. Well, it's like the two that I did with Mr. Reagan, right? That that like the first was the basically like, is there such a thing as structural racism, more or less, right? You know, and then the second was about Trump. And like, I feel good about both of them, but like undeniably, he did way better in the Trump debate than he did in the racism debate. And why is that? Because in the racism debate, like the only thing he was really prepared for was me calling him a racist and getting mad at him.
Yeah.
And since that didn't happen, he kind of didn't know what to do with it, right? Because I was doing stuff like, hey, here's this study showing that, you know, that black job applicants get fewer callbacks, you know, and he just didn't, you know, he just didn't really know what to do with it. He had to kind of improvise, and it was a mess. Whereas when we were arguing about Trump, I mean, like I don't, you know, I think I, you know, I think I more or less did what I should have, but like clearly he was on way more comfortable ground there, because any kind of he said, she said, the media says this about Trump, but here's the real thing, you know, like that's what
they love that.
Yeah, that's what he lives on, right? I mean, like he's been, by the time we had that debate, he had been doing nothing but that for like 5 years. Yeah. So like he's got it, right? Like he's ready for that. And I feel like the COVID thing would be kind of the same thing, that it's like
with Charlie, you go down that, and well, yeah, and also
because like I don't fucking know. I'm not an epidemiologist. Yeah. Like I have like I feel like do you watch that thing, like just quick diversion, like do you remember? Like last year, there was a point where Bill Burr was on the Joe Rogan show, and they started arguing about masks, and
I did not see that.
Okay, so it's really funny. Rogan says that I think Rogan kind of said later that he was just kidding. He was just kind of trying to wind Bill up, and maybe not. But but Rogan, but Bill Burr was great at it, right? Because he was like, you know, like, and I think they were like smoking cigars whenever the conversation. So he was like, look, Joe, I'm not going to sit here and have this argument with you. You know, me not a doctor, you not a doctor, you know, we're sitting here smoking cigars, you know, it's like, we're not going to do this. Like, I check in with what's going on in the news like once a month. I would say, oh, still masks? Okay, still masks. You know, like, you know, like, which is kind of how I feel. I'm not nearly interested enough to have like all of the nitty gritty of all of the stupid arguments people have about COVID, like to like really be on
so much of it, and so much information out there, and like so much false information out there. Like a good example might be, for instance, like the ivermectin thing.
Yeah.
On. Like there was for a while, it looked like some real evidence that ivermectin did something. And then it turned out, and this was, you actually brought up, because you brought up meta-analyses. And this is one of the problems actually with meta-analyses overall, is if you have a lot of studies that go into a meta-analyses, but like one of those studies is really big and really involves like a lot of people, it can skew the whole meta-analysis. And there was a study it was an Egyptian study. It was ginormous. It came down very strong on ivermectin. It was not peer reviewed, and it turned out the whole thing was fake. But it pulled several big time meta analyses that used it to kind of conclude that ivermectin did something. And then it was retracted once people found out that, for instance, like deliberately faked, like it had huge sections plagiarized, its numbers couldn't add up, like it counted dead people that died before the study started as dying during the study, like crazy shit like that. But like that got pulled, but the meta-analyses were still up for a while, and people don't hear about the retraction, they just hear about the study, and it got, shot out through the right-wing media. So like I guess
if I started to argue with Charlie Kirk about COVID, and like if he brought up whatever ivermectin study that was, I wouldn't know what that was. Like I have it's not really what I spend my time thinking about. I know I'm a layman. Like I think I think that COVID is really a public health threat on the level that that the sort of medical the medical establishment thing says it is largely. It's not. I could. This is an exaggeration. Like I know a little bit. I could point to like excess mortality figures and stuff, but like most of it is just like I'm not an epidemiologist. Most people who are seem to think this, so that's probably right. Like that's kind of what we're gonna do. That's pretty much where I'm at with it, right? Like if it seems like if it seems like public health, the public health authorities, CDC or the World Health Organization or whatever, thinks that something is not an effective COVID treatment, that I'm not going to. I wouldn't take it if I had COVID, because like I assume they probably know what they're talking about, which is fallible, because sometimes they don't. But like, it seems like the best like rubric that I could, realistically go by without, just like becoming a COVID obsessive.
So, like, exactly. Well, and okay, so the whole COVID thing with conservatives is so weird, because you had Charlie. And I had a moment kind of like that, and you even talked about where like he's just saying a bunch of stuff, and you're like, should I? When I was debating Molyneux, somebody,
I've had this experience with Molyneux that like every time he talks for 30 seconds, he'll say like 20 insane things, and like you have to decide. It's like, okay, what do I want to talk about now in response to this?
Yeah, what are you gonna do? Like, so when I was there, somebody just asked a question like in the super chat about the vaccine and like whether I would mandate it. And my anarchist response in this is no, because I don't trust the state to have that kind of power. But you should get the vaccine. And I told this story because I have a friend who's about as old as I am that lost both of her parents within a week to COVID, like right at the beginning. Like, mom has a runny nose on Wednesday. They're going to the hospital on Thursday. They're on the ventilator like Friday or Saturday. By Monday, the dad is dead. A couple days later, the mom follows him. She's an orphan now, and like my family also, like my wife, two of her cousins like just passed from COVID. Like this is some serious, and you should protect yourself and take steps to do it. And so like I said that, and then Stefan Molyneux was like, and I'm so angry at China. Like just like, wait, what? He monologued. I swear to you, he monologued for like a minute about China and how it's China's fault.
which is so bizarre, because like the two theories that are out there about the origins of COVID, in either case, the sort of anti-Chinese nationalism / anti-communism that like people like Molyneux would like doesn't really make sense for either of them, right? Because like if you go as with the lab leak hypothesis, well, these are the labs where people suspect, like these are US funded, right? I mean, like this is something that China did to us right?
Yeah.
This is, you could
the research on this. I think it began in the United States. It went to the United States, France, and then France to the lab. And,
as various governments wouldn't let it happen in house anymore, because it's too dangerous. So if that's what happened, then you could fault China for hosting this dangerous American research, but that's kind of you're faulting them for not being anti-American enough in that case. And then and then if you go with the other theory, the wet market theory, then that's actually, this is a point I actually made when I debated Balanou. That's the bitter fruit of deregulation. That China used to restrict wet markets a lot more than they do now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, it's a good point. Well, it's been 2 hours. This has been amazing. I guess my last question for you before you plug your pluggables, where do you think you were if there's one part in this debate that you think somebody should see where you just boom got him, what was it in your mind?
I think, so on the philosophy stuff, the Euthyphro dilemma, because that was just fun, because he he had, I actually posted to Twitter just the 1 minute clip of just this, right? Because it's because he says, I sort of, because part of what's going on here is that he really loves referencing philosophers, and he's he very much wants to be a great books guy, right? To talk about Hobbes and Locke and Rousseau and all that stuff, right? Plato, Aristotle.
Which, by the way, I could just say is so weird because he's the guy on the memes with the shrunken face.
But he desperately wants to be, a great books guy. I think this is actually pretty.
Maybe
important.
He should have gone to college. I'm being a dick here. I'm sorry. Continue.
But I think this is actually pretty important to self-conception. So so because when I said, given what you're saying about our rights come from God, I don't understand how you get around the youth problem. What you should have said, and by the way, this would have been perfectly legitimate. I don't think anybody would have blamed him for this. Was, what's that? I've never heard of that. Right? That would have been fine, right? You could just say that, right? Not everybody has to have heard of everything, but instead he just got this really confused look on his face. And then I started to, explain what it was. And there's this weird thing that happened where I said the word Plato, right? This dialogue written by Plato, and he said, yes.
That is a name I recognize.
Yeah. And then I explained the whole thing, so it's okay, so is it unjust to do this because God would object to it, or does God object to it because it's unjust? And the immediate answer that popped out of his mouth was both, which, and it's okay, so you've clearly never heard of this before 3 seconds ago, but but my God, you already have the answer, and your answer, I mean, man, I'll bet Plato wishes he'd thought of that, right?
If he thought of both,
it could just be both, right? Why not both? It's the gift, porque no dos, so I think that was probably the most sort of fun, individual moment, for me, as a philosophy nerd. I think that in terms of things that are more kind of core to the subject, I think probably the most fun thing was at the end when he was having his externalized inner dialogue about whether it would be okay to raise Jeff Bezos' taxes, by 1% to pay for the homeless veterans.
That was really good. Oh man. Okay, well, Ben, this has been amazing. Where can people find you, and who are you going to just body check next?
Well, nothing's on the books particularly. At some point I'm going to do a rematch with Larry Sharp, who's who is a former he ran for the Libertarian Party vice presidential nomination, and I think right now he's running for their New York gubernatorial nomination, and he was on the anyway, he wants to come back on the show. I'm not sure when that's happening, but otherwise, nothing's on the books. Set it up in modern day debate, and I would love to. You know, I want to be doing this more often, you know, than I am right now. So, but nothing in particular is on the books right now. I will say, actually, I said this on Left Reckoning, but I'll just say it right now. Like the thing, you know, I think actually the very last thing I said at the end of the whole thing, the whole 2 hours, like was sort of me being nice to him, but also like kind of jabbing a bunch of other people. And you know, I think my last line of the evening was, as much as we disagree, I think I want to give you credit, Charlie. You're one of the few conservatives who actually seems to want to do this. So you know, if you you know, your Jordan Petersons and your Ben Shapiros and your, you know, James Lindsay's and your you know, whatever, like all of these guys, like the you know, my mind, heart, door, and DMs are all open, right? You know, to give you know, reach out, and I'd be happy to. But I don't know. Actually, there's a group. I have no idea if this is going to happen, but there's somebody who lives in Moscow, Idaho, which is where Douglas Wilson's church is, who wants me to like, if you know, if he could set it up, you know, he wants me to like go down there and do another one, but in person this time. And you know, I'd certainly be happy to do that. But you know, whatever, you know, find a conservative who wants to do it, and I'm happy to do it. I will say that part of why doing the Kirk debate was exciting for me is that there was a change of pace. I think a really useful change of pace, because like 95% of the time I'm doing political debates, it's with libertarians, because like just the numbers are such that like, you know, like the
libertarians really love the idea of themselves as philosopher kings. Yeah.
Like that's kind of the problem, right? Like the two groups of people who really like doing this are us and libertarians.
Yeah.
Like, so which means that it just works out such that like most of the time it's like somebody, you know, it's the socialist versus libertarian thing, which don't get me wrong, you know,
good, but it's,
you know, it's good. I'm sure I'll do it many, many more times, but like, you know, I really enjoyed like actually getting to debate somebody who's just like a normal conservative and not a libertarian, like if only because something I want to have more practice doing, and also because like the actual spread of reactionary opinion in the United States, like look, do I have more respect for you know, do I have more respect for the sort of integrity of like a right-wing libertarian, you know, you're like not like a nutty Stefan Molyneux right-wing libertarian, but like you're sort of like meat and potatoes Dave Smith kind of right-wing libertarian, right? Like do I have more do I have more respect for his integrity than Charlie Kirk's? Well, obviously, right? But like I have but Charlie Kirk represents like 10 million times a greater chunk of right-wing opinion. And like, I think it's actually kind of more important to debate, you know, the Charlie Kirks.
Yeah. To tell you the truth, from watching the debate with like Charlie is a guy that I would be interested to talk to one of these days. I don't know if it'll ever happen, but like like almost not even as a debate. I just want to get in that head because he's got some crazy shit going on. And he seems to be at least a little good faith. By the way, Ben, I did want to bring this up. So my partner from the Stefan Molyneux debate, Swoletariat, is asking, does Ben want to debate a senior trot?
Maybe that's a thought. I mean, I kind of honestly, as a matter of policy, I mean, I have done intra-left debates before, and I will again. But I kind of
to do it.
Yeah, I would really prefer to like to focus 99% of my fire on the enemy if at all possible. But you know, I don't know, maybe, I mean, I don't know who you have in mind, you know, send me a DM. But either who you have in mind or what we'd be arguing about, you know, I'm you know, not necessarily completely closed off to the idea, but like given the option, right? You know, like I would much rather, you know, because I feel like I'm doing like, I have much more of a feeling that I'm doing good in the world if I debate reactionaries who have terrible, dangerous beliefs than I do if I'm debating somebody who's basically on my side, but I kind of think is wrong about some stuff.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the left savages itself quite a bit. It can be very interesting to go into that, but also you also cut the audience kind of in half. It's like an Adventure Time, guys. When all of the wizards are battling in the wizard showdown, the opposites go and fight each other first, and everybody wants to see that.
Yeah,
The ice wizard fights the fire guy.
I mean, I don't. Yeah, and I mean, so yeah, I'm much more excited at the thought of debating conservatives and libertarians and, you know, crazy mega church pastors and people like that than I am. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I mean, I actually get into this at the end of the Hitchens book a little bit, like, you know, that like the sort of like, you know, what's good and bad about Trotskyism, because like that's where he started, right? You know, his journey politically. And like, I don't know, I mean, where I kind of land is sort of like, well, I mean, Trotskyists can certainly be annoying, and the tradition is not without its faults and its flaws, but, you know, they're kind of right about a lot of really important things, you know, that like, you know, that like we don't like, there's a sort of like there's like a really important kind of porque no los dos insight that's like sort of the, you know, that like you could have the like you don't have to pick between being a Reagan apologist and a Brezhnev apologist. Like you could just be, you know, you could just like plant your flag in a better kind of socialism. Like I actually think that's a really important and valuable insight in whatever else they got wrong. Like I actually think they deserve some credit for sort of carrying the flame of that idea.
Yeah, absolutely. I would be interested to watch some trot based dialogues. You know, and I also maybe you could debate ice picks. Or mountain climbers' axes, I think it was. You know what was badass about that, by the way? Because if you read the details of that assassination, like Trotsky gets hit with like the freaking mountain climbers' axe. The dude's bodyguards break in. They want to kill the guy, and because Trotsky turned around and fought him, and then it's like, no, he must answer questions. He lives for like 2 more days. I'm sorry,
Jesus,
that's hardcore.
That is extremely hardcore. That's although I will say that that's also one of the objections to American Trotskyism, because the SWP provided his guards in Mexico, and clearly they should have been providing better guards, you know. So
clearly. All right. Well, so this has been wonderful. Where can people find you?
Yeah. So the show's Give Them an Argument, and I write for Jacobin, and wrote a couple books. The new one that's coming out is Christopher Hitchens, What He Got Right, How He Went Wrong, Why It Still Matters, and the sort of, if you don't want to remember a bunch of other stuff, just go to benburgis.com. You can pretty much find it all there.
Awesome. Yeah, please check this out. This was terrific, and I look forward to many wonderful debates. You're an awesome guy, Ben, and please keep making the argument for a better, saner, more compassionate world.